It really is a tremendous pleasure both to be together and especially because we're zocheh to have someone speak to us this evening who really speaks for what I would call a world of experience. In other words, it is very usual for us to hear, Baruch Hashem, we're living in a generation where we hear much divrei Torah and we hear many young Rabbanim address us, but we have the pleasure this evening of having someone who has a real world view based on having lived through much of recent Jewish history. An individual who is a tremendous askin, whose reputation is very, very well known. A person who, according to his grandson, Rabbi Winter has told me, has had a kesher and a shayches with many, many gedolim. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Rabbi Amos Bunim, speaking about being a Torah activist.
Thank you very much, Rav Schaefer, Rav Schaefer Shlita, my grandson, Moshe Winter, who called me to ask me to come to speak at this occasion. I welcome all the wonderful guests here tonight, and I hope all of you have hatzlacha in everything that you're doing in life, and you should continue to go, meichayel el chayel, from strength to strength. I always try to start my speeches with a Dvar Torah, so that a Dvar Torah that's very meaningful, that could be remembered by everybody. Tonight I really have chosen a Dvar Torah which is very applicable to the days that we are living. We are living through days that are filled with anguish and pain. Terrorist acts are terrifying to Klal Yisrael throughout the world. And we are witnessing the devastating power of Islamic fundamentalism. We can find the very important words of Nechama in the Yalkut Shimoni in Yeshaya, which depicts very vividly the time in which we are living, and it gives us a thorough understanding of world conditions and how it relates to us. And the Medrash reads as follows. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Shana Shemelach Mashiach Niglo Bo, Kol Malchei Umos HaOlam Metagrim Zeh Bo Zeh. Rabbi Yitzchak said, the days when the Melech Mashiach will come and will reveal himself, the nations of the world will be fighting with each other. Melech Paras Mitagruba Melech Aravi, ancient Persia, which is Iran, is fighting with the Arab countries. Saudi Arabia, Egypt. V'holech Melech Aravi la'aram, and the Arab kingdoms and sheikdoms go to Syria. Litol Eitzah Mehem, in order to seek their advice. V'chozer Melech Paras, and Iran goes in the meantime, umachriv es ha'olam, to destroy, and Iran go to destroy the entire world with its Islamic fundamentalism and its atomic capabilities. V'chol umos ha'olam misrashim, all the nations of the world are panicky, umisbalim, and are frightened. V'noflim al paneihem v'yachzu osam tzirim kitzirei leida. And the nations of the world are grabbed with pains that are severe as labor pains. V'Yisrael misrashim u'misbalim, and Klal Yisrael is filled with tremendous fear and tremendous anguish and panicky. V'omer laheicha navo v'neilech, where can we go to find refuge? Laheicha navo v'neilech, where can we go and find refuge? Amar lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael, Bonai al tisra'u, komasho asisi lo asisi ela b'shvilchem. My children, do not be fearful. Whatever I am doing for you. Why are you fearful? The days of redemption have arrived. And the day of redemption will not be like the first days of redemption. Because the first geula, the first redemption, was subordinated and sublimated to the nations of the world. The second geula, there will be no sublimation, there will be no subordination. And therefore, Klal Yisrael, Al Tisra'u, do not be afraid, do not be fearful. How the Medrash depicts the very days that we are living. It is unbelievable to understand how a Medrash in Yalkut Shimoni could depict these very days that we are living through today. In understanding how one is to be a Torah activist, I must tell you an episode that happened with my father, Zatzal, who was one of the greatest Torah activists of our times, together with the great Gadol of our age, Harav Hagon, Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Zechet Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha. There was an organization called Vad Hatzalah that started in the year 1939, when the great Gadol of the age of in Europe, Reb Chaim Ozer, Zechet Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, saw what was going to happen in Europe. And he sent a telegram to his tremendously close Talmud, Rabbi Eliezer Silva, the president of the Agudas HaRabbanim and the Rav in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he told him, you must start an organization called Vad Hatzalah to save the yeshiva people from the terrible things that were going to happen in Europe. And so Vad Hatzalah was organized in 1939. My father was made the chairman of Vad Hatzalah as the Torah activist. When Rabbi Kotler came to America in 1941, on April 23rd, 1941. And he came to Pennsylvania Station from San Francisco, and he said, I came to America for two purposes. Number one, to save as many Jews as I could in Europe. And number two is to build Torah in America, to rebuild the Torah that was destroyed in Europe. And so he decided in 1943 that the organization that was started to save the Torah world had to be organized or reorganized, not only to save the Torah world, but to save Jewry in general in Europe. Because he saw that all the secular organizations were not interested in saving the Jews, but they were interested, their only interest was to acquire Palestine and to make it a state after the war. But they were not interested in Hatzalah. And so Rabbi Aaron Kotler made this very great decision and said, we must save all of Europe because there is nobody else to do it. And so in the years until 1944, they were able to save, through ransom, illegal activities, and extra legal activities, and they were able to save 100,000 Jews. But then they were waiting for the great moment which arrived in November 1944, when Vad Hatzalah had a representative in Switzerland by the name of Isaac Sterenbuch and his wife, Recha Sterenbuch. And they were able to make contact with the former president of Switzerland, Mr. Musi, who was a fascist in his own rights. And he had a contact to Yamach Shemo V'Zichro, Mr. Himmler, the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler. And so after very, very difficult negotiations, which many people tried to break from the secular world, the Sternbuchs were able to work out a deal for $17 a head because Mr. Himmler saw that they were going to lose the war. And he wanted money deposited in Switzerland for after the war. And so he made a deal for $17 a head. For every Jew that I save, he said, from the concentration camp, you will deposit $17 in Switzerland. And he said, I will show you my goodwill. I will send 2 train loads from Bergen-Belsen of 1,636 Jews. And I will send 1 train load from Theresienstadt of 1,210 Jews. Which he did. And they arrived in Switzerland. And it's interesting to note that one of the people on the train from Bergen-Belsen was the Satmar Rebbe. And one of the grandsons that was of one of the people on that train load came over to me one day and said, I want to tell you that we owe you the thanks, but your father is not living, and we would like to express our hakaras hatov to you for saving our lives, for your father saving our lives, with the Satmar Rebbe on the train. And so, after that, Mr. Himmler sent word. He said, now that I showed you my goodwill, I want you to deposit immediately $1,200,000 as a down payment. And so the Sternbuch sent a telegram to New York. In those days, 1 million, today it's still a very substantial number, but in those days it was an impossible number. And so the people went from Vadatzola, from state to state, from city to city, and they were able to raise $230,000 in a very short period of time. But they were short $970,000. And so Rabbi Kotler made a very important decision. He said, I will go to the Joint Distribution Committee, and who I know fought us throughout the years of the war, because they said, we will not accept your philosophy of ransom. We will not accept your philosophy of extra legal activities, of bribes, because we don't believe that that's the correct way. But Rabbi Kotler said to himself at all times, and said to the people that were in Vadatzola, that we go with Torah law, and Torah law tells us that Pikuach Nefesh is Dochet Torah, that Pikuach Nefesh pushes aside Torah, and therefore to save lives we can do anything, because that's what the Torah demands of us. We take our marching orders from Sinai, and they take their marching orders from Washington. And so he decided to go to Mo Levitt, the head of the Joint Distribution Committee. And he called Mo Levitt for an appointment, and he immediately gave him the appointment because he knew of Rabbi Kotler. He did not know him personally. And Rabbi Kotler came to Mo Levitt with my father, and they said to Mo Levitt, they told him the entire story, and they said, we want to come here not to ask you for the money, but we want to borrow $970,000, and we will repay it. We just need time to raise it. And Mo Levitt said to Rabbi Kotler, I don't understand you, Rabbi. You are a Rosh Yeshiva. Do you know that the people that you're saving are apostates? Do you know that the people that you are saving are totally had given up Judaism? How do you come to save these kind of people? And Rabbi Kotler got up from his seat, his chair, and with fire in his eyes, he said to Mo Levitt, I want to tell you something today, and I never want you to forget it. Yisrael, afal pi shechata Yisraelu. I stand by the principle of what the Talmud taught me, that a Jew, even if he sinned, is a Jew. And it's my obligation as a Rosh Yeshiva to save every Jew, no matter how far he has gone astray. Unbelievable situation. The secular Jew talking that way, the juxtaposition of this situation, and the Rosh Yeshiva talking like you would expect from a secular Jew. And then Rabbi Cutler said to him, we need that money, and we want to borrow it. And Mo Levitt said to Rabbi Cutler, I don't understand you, Rabbi Cutler. You know that we are against ransoms. You know that we are against bribes. You know that we are against extra-legal activities. How dare you come to me to ask me for this money? And my father, and Rabbi Cutler turned to my father and said, Mr. Bunim, you answer him. And my father said to him, I want you to know, Mr. Levitt, if you do not help us at this time and lend us this money, we will send a letter to every member of the Joint Distribution Committee, every supporter, and we will tell them that the blood of 300,000 Jews is on your hands, and we will destroy your organization. And Mo Levitt saw that they meant business, and he was fearful. And he said, I will lend you this money, but on one condition. The law is that you must get permission from the State Department if you want to give money to the enemy during war. If you get that permission, I will lend you that money. And so Rabbi Cutler said to him, I want you to know, Mr. Levitt, if we have to tear the city of Washington apart, we will get that permission. And then he said to my father immediately, let us go to Washington. And they went through their connections to see Mr. Roosevelt, the president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president of the United States. And Mr. Roosevelt, who was not a friend of the Jews, always had a way of getting out of every single Jewish problem that came to him, because he had one member in his cabinet, a Jew, Henry Morgenthau Jr., the Secretary of the Treasury. And he was able to deflect any requests through Mr. Morgenthau. And so he said to them, I can't help you because you must go to see Mr. Morgenthau if you need help. And I will call him for you. And of course, when he called him, he gave him the information to get rid of these rabbis as quickly as you could. And so they went to Mr. Morgenthau. And they explained Mr. Morgenthau the entire situation. And Mr. Morgenthau said to them, you've come to me? I am the only Jew in the cabinet. You are coming to the wrong person. How can I go and help this situation when American boys are dying on the battlefield? And Rabbi Cutler got up with burning eyes, and he said to him in Yiddish. Rabbi Cutler understood English but did not speak English. And he said to him in Yiddish, and I will translate it in a few moments. And he said to him in Yiddish, als wilt nicht helfen zu retten jeden in der kritischen Zeit. Seid wert gar nicht. Stelle ist wert gar nicht. Ein jüdischer Leben ist wert mehr wie alle Stellen in Washington. And he turned to my father, Mr. Morgenthau, and he said, I saw that the rabbi's eyes were burning, and I saw that his words were very severe, but I do not understand Yiddish. Perhaps you could translate it for me. And my father, basically, who was raised in America, he came here when he was 9 years old, and he had the American culture behind him, could not put it in such severe terms. And so he tried to mollify and mitigate the words. And he said, you know, Mr. Morgenthau, there comes a time in life that you have responsibility to your own people. And you have to see to it that you save your own people at this critical time. And Rabbi Cutler looked at my father. And he understood that he did not translate the words the way he said it. And he said to my father, Mr. Bunim, "Sagt immer, was ich hab gesagt." Repeat exactly what I said. And my father, with his amunas chachamim and das Torah, had no hesitation. And he said to Mr. Morgenthau, "I will now translate the exact words of the rabbi." And the rabbi said to you, Mr. Morgenthau, in this critical time, if you are not ready to save your fellow Jews, you are worth nothing. Your position is worth nothing. One Jewish life is worth more than all the positions in Washington. Mr. Morgenthau put his head down on the desk and did not say a word. And for 10 minutes, he had his head on the desk. And then he picked up his head and he said, "Mr. Bunim, you tell the rabbi that I am a Jew. And you tell the rabbi to come back here at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and he will have that license." My dear friends, what does this teach us? This teaches us the relentless, boundless, and limitless achrayus that the Gedolim have for each and every individual of Klal Yisrael. They are dauntless and fearless in their endeavors. The Gedolim represent the nitzchias, the eternity and continuity of Klal Yisrael. They have the Masorah that goes midor dor, from generation to generation. Therefore, we owe it to ourselves to have the greatest feeling, to respect and reverence to the Gedolei Yisrael. We must always understand our responsibility for unbending and unyielding das Torah and amunas chachamim. I just would like to depict to you another episode. As time is running out, I probably could go on and on with you. But something that happened with me and Rabbi Cutler. I was 26 years old, and Rabbi Cutler called me, and at that time, my father-in-law, Edward S. Silver, was the district attorney of Brooklyn, the first Jewish Shomer Shabbos to hold a major position in the city of New York. And Rabbi Cutler called me and said there were quite a number of Jews that were involved in smuggling gold into the United States that came from the concentration camps. And it was a very severe penalty for smuggling gold into this country. And he said, "I would like to ask you if you could call your father-in-law if he could intercede with the judge." And I said to him, "Rosh Yeshiva, it is impossible to ask my father-in-law that question. He could never do it." So he says to me, "Then I want you to go to speak to the judge." But I said, "Rosh Yeshiva, I never was in court in my life. I'm not a lawyer. I do not know the ways of court." And he argued back and forth with me on the telephone for 15 minutes. And finally I asked him, every point I raised, he had to point back to me. And finally I asked him, "Rosh Yeshiva, are you telling me this? Begeder das Torah and amunas chachamim?" And he said to me, "Yes." He didn't say that to me, I asked him. And he said to me, "Yes." And I said, "Then I have no choice." He said, "That's right." He said, "But one thing I do want to tell you, that whatever you do in life, if you do it with emes, you will always succeed." And so I asked him, "Who's the name of the judge?" And he says it's a judge by the name of Judge Lynch from Alabama. He's sitting here on a temporary basis, has no secretary, you can't even get an appointment with him. And I said to myself, the odds here are 1,000,000 to 1 against me. I can't get an appointment. I have no way of reaching the judge. I don't know the ways of court. And Rabbi Cutler is sending me. But I had no choice. I went. And so I walked up the steps of the federal court, and I began to think of how many families were involved and what responsibility was on my shoulders. And I began to cry as I was walking up the steps and started to say to him. And I walked up to the receptionist on the ground floor in the lobby, and I said to him, I'd like to speak with Judge Lynch if I can get an appointment. And he said, I'm sorry. You can't speak to Judge Lynch on the phone because he has no secretary. All you could do is go up to room 611, knock on the door, and if he receives you, you could go in. I said to myself again, how will I ever get to see this judge? And I knock on the door, and he comes in from 3 empty rooms inside to answer the door. And he says, yes, can I help you? And I said, yes, Your Honor. I am here representing the Chief Justice of Jewish law. He says to me, who's the Chief Justice of Jewish law? I said, Rabbi Aaron Cutler. I said, where does he said to me, where does he reside? I said, in Lakewood, New Jersey. He said, what does he do? I said, he's the head of the greatest yeshiva, greatest Talmudic school in the world. And he says, come in. And I come in. And he says, what can I do for you? And here the Ribono Shalom put an idea into my mind as I'm sitting there. And I said to him, Your Honor, I want to tell you something. I am an American. I love democracy. I love everything that America stands for. I love the freedom of America. I cherish America. But there's no way in this world that you can judge these people as an American. These people come from a world that had no respect for human life. How could they have respect for law? You cannot judge them the same way as you judge an American. And he says to me, this was on Thursday, and he says to me, I am leaving tomorrow, Friday, back to Alabama. The case comes up to me. I just want you to know, I don't know whether I could help you. But what I do want you to do is go down to the head of the probation department and tell him exactly what you just told me. And I want it to be put into the probation report. I thanked him very much, and I went down to the head of the probation department. And the person in charge there said, the head of the probation department is out today. But I said to him, but the judge said to me I should find the head of the probation department. And if I can't find him, I should go back to the judge. He said, oh no, in federal court the judge is at such high esteem. We must find him for you. And he says, we will find him, and he will be here in a half an hour. And they called him to come in from Queens. And he came, and I said, what can I do for you? And I explained to him what the judge wanted. And he put everything in writing into the probation report. The next day was Friday morning. And I'm sitting, the case does come up Friday morning, and I'm sitting in the back of the court. And the judge gets up with tremendous diatribe. And he says what these people did was against every law in America. Everything that America stands for, they violated. How could people do such a travesty? It's beyond understanding. And my heart was sinking and sinking and sinking. He went on for 10 minutes that way. And finally he said, but. And he reads this whole report from the probation department. And he says, therefore, sentence suspended. I wanted to go over to the judge to thank him. I did not know that in federal court you're not permitted to go over to the judge without asking reshus or permission from the bailiff. And so I was walking up and the bailiff sent me back. He said, you can't go up there without permission. And the judge saw what happened, he waved me on. And we shook hands, and not one word was exchanged between the two of us. But he understood what I meant, and I understood what he meant. I ran to the telephone, and I called Rabbi Cutler to tell him what had happened. When he spoke with him, I thought he would jump through the telephone with joy. And people tell me that on that Shabbos, they never saw such simcha in Lakewood as they saw that Shabbos, that Rabbi Cutler was so filled with simcha, so filled with joy, and so filled with happiness. And so I learned the deepest lesson of my life. As difficult as it might seem, as impossible as it was, when Das Torah tells you something, you have to have the Amunos Chachamim to understand that you must do it, no matter how impossible it might be, how difficult it might be, because this really represents what Torah stands for. And to all of you, I say to you, that in this day and age, when we see the Ikvasa de Mashiach, when we hear the heels of Mashiach coming, it is your obligation, our obligation, together to learn Torah. It is our obligation for Kiyum HaMitzvos. And with that, we can bring Mashiach to us. B'mheira b'yameinu. Amen.
Rabbeinu, thank you very much. Very, very warm words, very great lesson. I also want to acknowledge we have, I as a little boy growing up, I grew up in this very shul. And I distinctly remember sitting in the front row during Pirkei Avos when Rabbi Schoenfeld and Mora Asra would give the Pirkei Avos here. And it's my great honor to have with us this evening as a guest, Rabbi Schoenfeld. I just want to acknowledge. Thank you.
I would like to personally greet my very, very dear friend, Rabbi Schoenfeld. Go back to many, many years ago, back to the yeshiva when we both learned together in Yeshivas Rabbeinu Yitzchak Kanan. And I really feel greatly honored to have him here with us tonight. I thank you very much, Rabbi Schoenfeld, for coming. Thank you very much.